Feeling the need for change is at the heart of your ability to make it happen. I'm Vivian Carrasco, and I'd like to welcome you to Turning Inward. I am your creative midwife, your teacher, and host of this podcast. Together, we're going to navigate the interior life by unearthing your personal truth, insight, and your inner knowing. In 2 words, this is your inner work. Hello, lovelies. It is so absolutely wonderful to be back with you. This is getting to be fun again, and that's just lovely. So today we have a special episode for you. I think I say special a lot, but they are. They're all special. But today is extra special because Sarah Dietman is joining me. Yay! Hi, Sarah.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey. So I had a birthday recently. I turned the big 4-4. Like right now, I'd be having like this like really like stance like 4-4 like that, if you can imagine it. And I asked Sarah to have a chat with me in our normal chatty style because I felt like, I think this year is the first year I felt like a grown-up. I've always wanted to be grown-up. I think I have an old soul. And so I had a couple of things that I jotted down that if for any reason I don't have an opportunity to meet my granddaughters and my great-granddaughters, these are 3 things that I would want you to know. And so I also want every girl and woman to know these things for themselves because I think that they're meaningful and that they'll change our lives in positive ways. So with that, I think we'll just get started. And Sarah and I are just going to chit-chat the way we normally chit-chat. I have a lot of fun in the friction between people. And I feel like more of me comes through and less of what I think you want to hear from me. So that's why I asked Sarah to join me. How you doing, Sarah?
I'm doing well. I'm feeling really good right now.
You are?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to tell you that it was a little hard for me to put down my fork because I was in the middle of a chipotle bowl.
Those are the best.
With like extra cheese and guacamole. It was like, maybe we'll reschedule. Okay.
But you did it.
I did it. Sarah, you and I met a couple of years ago now as we were going through Martha Beck's life coach training.
Yes.
And I call you my bestie.
Hey. I'm honored.
So just a little more enthusiasm. Just kidding.
I went for a run and then I just did like another half an hour workout. So you got me in my chill mode. So
okay.
I'm sending you tons of enthusiasm, but perhaps not through my voice.
Oh, I hear you. I actually just finished a 75-minute session of hot yoga, which is why I'm famished.
Whoa.
Yeah, I feel good though. So I turned 44.
Yay.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm curious. So, when birthdays come up, in general, you're never supposed to ask a woman her age. And so with that, obviously, for me, at least, even every year that like I'm creeping towards, there's a little bit of like this, yay, I'm excited and I'm grateful to be turning and experiencing another year. But at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? Did you have any of that this year, or were you just like super pumped?
I didn't have that this year, but I have an interesting story about my age. For a long time, I really didn't even know how old I was because I lied about my age a lot. And I always added like 5 or 6 years to my age because I was pregnant at 17. So I did things a lot earlier than quote unquote normal people in our society do them, even though it was totally normal to have a kid at 17. And so I'd lie. And then sometimes I'd do the math and I'd go, oh, that's not how old I am. This is how old I am. So what I focused on is like the age, the number, the digit doesn't matter. But I just wanted to feel like a grown up. Even turning 18 or 21 or whatever milestone came up, I never felt like I was grown. And this year, this is why I said, this is a good year. I feel like a grown up.
Do you know what makes you feel like a grown up?
Yeah. I
What is
do.
it? That's awesome. Tell us.
And those are like, it's not a lot. I mean, okay, so in 44 years, I have 3 things to share with you.
So these are the 3 things that make you feel like a grown-up?
Yeah, these are the 3 things that make me feel like a grown up. And it's interesting because one of the things that is, I don't know, like a huge part of who I am and what my personality is, as I've grown up into this space or this whatever I am, I always felt like if I learned something, then I would understand it and I would know it. So I was always in this sort of like grasping for this knowing. Like I want to know, like it was really nerve wracking for me when I got pregnant because I'm like, I don't know how to raise a kid. How am I going to raise a kid? Like I had babysat, a ton of cousins because my mom is one of 13 and her mom is one of 13. So babies everywhere. Like I wasn't nervous, but yeah, big Mexican Catholic family. Totally. I wasn't nervous about raising Josh. I just wanted to do the best job at raising him. Like I'm total perfectionist. So I read all the books, right? I read all the books. I did all the things. I had like words at his height. I did all these really like textbook intellectual things. But it was interesting. I didn't follow my nature or my natural. And what I realized as I was going through raising Josh, at some point, like I realized he wasn't talking. And David was deployed at the time. And I would go from, school to work. I mean, it was school and work for like the first 3 decades of my life. And he wasn't talking. And then I realized, you know what? I'm not talking to him. And I'm not talking to him because I don't think he can talk back. But the books might have told me that, but I don't know. It was just weird. So I would get confused about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And so the 3 things that I feel like I want to share with you, with my granddaughters, with my great-granddaughters, with all the women of the world that I think is meaningful based on my experience in my life are these 3 things. So you ready for them?
I am. Drum roll, please.
Drum roll. And yeah, maybe we'll have music added there. Who knows what production will sound like. So the first one is the idea that walls will protect me is the first one. So even though I've always naturally built relationships with people and been able to connect and sort of have empathy and all these natural skills that are part of my personality, I never really let people in. So I had these walls. And even when David and I actually got married, he said to me, and these are really true words that he said to me. He said, I have a little chisel and I'm going to use it to break through the walls of your heart until I get through. And I probably gave him an eye roll at the time. Because I was super closed off. I really felt like I am not going to let people hurt me. I had an experience, and for those of you that are new, I'll go into it a tiny bit, but if you've listened to past episodes of the podcast, you know that I had a near-death experience because I was physically hit by a car as I was crossing the street in 2014, April 2014 to be exact. And one of the things that happened as a result of that, of my spirit basically being shaken out of my body, is I felt like I experienced what it would be like to be one with everything. And there aren't words to describe it. It was just peace and heaven. And when I came back from that, I wasn't as guarded. And I think my body had let go a lot of pain that it held on to. So there was this like sense that I had physically forgiven both myself and everyone that had ever hurt me. And I think it let me start over. So I don't know how anyone can practically apply that to their lives, but I want to say that we as human beings have to be in relationship. That's how we learn to live. And if we close ourselves off, we're just killing ourselves slowly. So intimacy and vulnerability is tough, but it's worth it.
Okay, but I'm curious now. So you say you don't have like a practical way to necessarily have the experience that you've had. Like, so let's jump ahead then. and okay, it's after the experience and all of a sudden you're open, what did like this shift or change in intimacy and vulnerability actually look like?
I think I just started to have faith in people again. And I believed, not just in my mind, but I understood that if someone was being mean or hurtful, that was their pain talking. And I was just able to see people with more love. And I think that, so now what's coming up for me is when the boys were little and they would scream or they would cry or they would be upset, I would sort of bend down at knee level and look at them, and I would just sense, are you hungry? Like, I wouldn't tell them this, like they didn't know I was doing this, but I'm like, are you hungry? Are you tired? Do you need a hug? Like, when we're in pain, we're not being fully human. We're either in what those basic, like, instinctual brain areas where you're a lizard, a rat, or a monkey. You're not fully human. And a lot of times we expect things from people that they can't give us. And so now that I'm talking through this, I'll say that I was able to, after that experience, give without that expectation of, now you give me back. So I think before it was like a give and take. It was, even in the early years of our marriage, it was very like, this marriage has to be equal, right? Like, I changed Joshua's pamper last time. It's your turn. No ifs, ands, nothing. It's your turn, right? Like, taking turns, tit for tat. That was sort of how I navigated relationships before the experience.
Okay. I'm just thinking, obviously I'm like, well, sounds like me.
And I think it's a lot. It sounds like a lot of us. That's why as a woman, as a girl, as someone growing up in this Western society, we don't open up to knowing that the experience we're going through, other people are going through too. And I don't know if it's the way we're raised or that girls have more individual sports than boys do, but there's just something about the experience that we move through, and we sort of isolate ourselves and we think it's just me and something's wrong with me and I'm not doing something right. But it could be just a natural growing. Like, first we're a seed, then we're a seedling, then we're, just these stages of growth that we go through in every area of our life. So I think that would have happened for me naturally, and I think it happens for everyone evolutionary. Like, it's just going to happen if you allow it. But the friction that we move through in our life either sets us in a stone, like it's going to stay that way, or it slowly unfolds. But because of my experience, I think I had a shortcut button. Because I probably would have gotten there when I was like 80.
But how do you, okay, so let's say in that scenario afterwards, you were just able to see and be more willing to give without expecting anything in return. And where do you draw the line? Because at the same time, there are boundaries that need to be drawn, or probably that people have been conditioned into realizing that if you don't have them, you'll be taken advantage of. I think there are two extremes.
Dude, that is literally the next thing I was going to talk about. See? So the second thing that I've learned in my 44 years, or it's actually technically 43, right? Because this is my 44th year.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're,
it's in 43 years. The second thing that I learned is about boundaries. And I knew about boundaries from a textbook perspective, and I knew about it from the theories and the this and the that and the quotes, but I didn't understand my own boundaries. And now I do. And the way that I think about this, and this is when I thought about what were the significant learning experiences in my life around this, it's basically, at its basic, most simple level, is I know what's a yes for me, and I know what's a no for me. And I can tell you whether something's okay or it's not okay.
So everything for you is either or. It's never in between?
Actually, the either or I don't believe exists. What I try to look for, I know what's okay for me, right? But what I try to look for is under the rug, what is sort of that third thing? If it's between another person, then is there a third outcome that serves us both? Because it's so easy to say it's either or, and that's not really how life is. But I can say to myself, is this okay with me? Or is this not okay with me? Is this a yes for me or is this a no for me? And I didn't know what that was, and I didn't trust myself before. And now I don't say I'm not 100% on this at any one time, but I think I was like at 12% before, and now I'm like in the 80s. So it's been the other most significant distinction and difference between not knowing what the heck to do and feeling like I've got my grounding. I'm a grown up. I know what I want, and I know whether it's a yes or no for me.
In relationships.
I think in life, in living. Like, it used to be difficult for me to choose an item off of menu. I mean, it just... Are you laughing because that happens to you too?
Yeah.
You guys, you see why I invited Sarah to like chat with me? Yeah, it used to be hard to pick something off a menu. Now I know exactly what I want.
Okay, but like, what do you pay attention to? Like, do you have, like, because instantly you know me, I like strategy. Like, so if you go to a restaurant and there are 3 choices, you could have, well, these aren't going to sound delicious, but they probably would have been. You could have Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, or tuna. Like, how do you decide?
Well, so I'm just going to use your example literally. I don't enjoy tuna. So, and I love both broccoli and cauliflower. So the next thing I would check is how'd they cook it? Because you can make cauliflower taste like French fries. And I know the places that do that. So that would be an easy pick. You know, I wish
bad example. What is something like, give yourself 3 choices that are like all equally good. Like, do you have a strategy? Do you have like a mental
thing? I think that, so here's what's happening is you're approaching it from the level of knowing that I was approaching it before. There is a better, there is a good, there is a better, and there is a best.
Okay, so you feel it.
So you actually, it's leaving yourself open to a possibility you didn't even know existed. That's how good it can get. Like, I don't leave it open to just this. It's like, it could be even better. But I know what my baseline is. So in the case of like choosing a restaurant, right? I know that for me, it's really not even the menu items. It's the experience I'm going to have, whether or not it's dining outside or inside, or if it's crowded or if it's less people. So I wouldn't even focus on what kind of food it is. It would be on what do I want to experience. It's a beautiful day. I want to be outside. So it's not being pigeonholed into the choice that you see in front of you. You think that's your choice. You have to pick the food. When in reality, for me, for myself, for the deepest part of who I am, I could give 2 shits about the food. It's about what I'm going to experience when I'm there. What is the place going to give me?
And so, for instance, if you had a scenario placed in front of you where you weren't able to have the experience that you wanted when you're eating, that's just your boundary and you wouldn't go there, or you wouldn't go to eat, or what? I mean, I'm just trying to understand this in like a more like everyday type of situation, like with the boundaries.
I think it's actually...
Or is that just more choice?
It's just more choice, yeah. I think what's true about the boundaries is that, am I making a choice to please you? Like, do I know that you're going to like to go there? And so then I'm not honoring my own self? Or am I making a choice for some cultural reason or some other reason other than what I know that I want? I think for me, that's about my yeses and nos too. What's okay and what's not okay. So boundaries are complicated.
Yeah. It seems like it's like a blurred, like, mesh of things between, like, obviously decision making and choices and, like, your limits, obviously. But
I think it's more about your limits and less about your choices and your decision making. It's about just knowing. And this is actually one of the things I admire about you. Like, you have good boundaries. You can say, I think you do, tell me where I'm wrong. When you're tired and you don't feel like talking or you don't have availability, you just say, I'm not available. You don't make an excuse about it, you know? I don't think that you think, oh, she's not going to like me or she's going to be mad at me if I don't do that. And that's how I used to be. I used to want to make the choice that would make other people happy. And who am I to know what's going to make somebody else happy?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't really work out that way.
No, because it ends up pissing both of y'all off.
Yeah.
Because under the surface, you feel it and you know it. And I didn't understand that that was what was happening. I really thought I was doing a good thing. And then people would get angry and I'm like, but I did it for you. And I really, and that doesn't help.
Right. It just kind of turns into a dysfunctional situation.
Totally dysfunctional. Dis to the functional.
But I mean, like, I've just always been weird like that in terms of, like, my time and stuff. But there are different scenarios in my life where I still consider that. But yeah, it does take practice too, like reminding yourself of that.
Life is practice. There is no perfection.
Yeah.
So the third thing I have, and this one for me, I think is the biggest one because it was the toughest to learn. And if I get triggered these days, it's around something like this. So I'm still learning it, but I now can see the distinction between the two. So I'm on the edge, but if I were to be talking to my granddaughter, my great-granddaughter, or any woman or boy that I love, I would say that this is where we figure out what's juicy. I think this is the like, you know, like what do they call that? The fulcrum, the leverage thing.
Oh, like the tipping point?
Yeah, I think this really, when you get this right, you get it. So I'll talk a little more.
Yeah, you're kind of building this up, Vivian.
So the third thing is the difference between belonging and fitting in.
Okay.
And for my entire life up until a couple of years ago, I was all about fitting in. And I could fit in anywhere. I was like a chameleon. And I literally could just make myself fit in. It was a skill. And I lost myself. Recently, I have come to an understanding of the difference between what it feels like when I fit in somewhere versus what it feels like when I belong there in that group with those people and that's whatever it is. Mm-hmm. There's a difference. And this is what I feel like cuddles my soul like a blanket around a fire. Ooh. Is when I belong.
Can you fit in and belong at the same time too?
I don't know, honestly, but I know that the way that I'm describing them, they oppose each other. Because when you're fitting in, you're fitting into something else. And when you're belonging, you're being yourself. And you're becoming more and more of who you already are and relying less on what someone else wants you to be. And you're discerning those things. But for a long time, a super long time, I thought that I was becoming more of me by fitting in. And that was a lie. Because I thought that I could get something that would give me something else. Whether it was my parents' love and acceptance or someone's admiration or whatever it was, right? Mm-hmm. It was for them. It wasn't for me. And what I've experienced recently is, I'm not going to call it I don't give a shit attitude, but love me or leave me. I am who I am.
Bam.
Drop the mic. And I think for what the difference between then and now is, like, before I was lukewarm. I wanted everyone to like me. And when everyone likes you, you're not you.
Yeah, and I also think too, though, like even what you're describing of like this more or less kind of indifference of what people think, that it could also be confused by like an extra big ego. And I hope I'm saying this in a way that makes sense. Like, I feel like some people, instead of like trying to fit in, they go on the other end and try to like stand out, and like they don't care what people think, but they really do, obviously. And it sounds like where you're at is just kind of, there is none of that attitude. It just is.
I hope so. Because again, we are our body and our hearts and all these other senses that we don't really tune into know that that's a lie. So you could see someone that has that attitude, and you just you just kind of go, yeah, whatever. Like, they care, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't. I think it makes me less. I don't think it makes me mean at all. Like, I'm still very compassionate, and I'm still very loving, and I'm still myself. But it's so much easier for me to let things go.
Yeah, that to me, that just sounds mature.
Which is why I'm like, dude, I finally feel like a freaking grown up.
Ah.
And it only took me 43 years and, 10,000 advanced degrees and 15,000 hours of whatever.
Well, like you said, it's all practice.
But they're shortcuts. There are shortcuts, I think. This is, I've said I think a lot. It's not the thinking, it's the knowing. So one of the things that's consistent about what I believe about the audience that listens to Turning Inward is they've got this, and I have The Way to Love right in front of me. I just read this today, so I'm going to flip open to it. There is not a single human being who hasn't, this is Anthony DeMello, the divine flame of discontent arises within your heart. This is what happens when people start to turn away from the noise on the outside and start to tune in to what's really going on with me. That's that divine discontent. And for me, it didn't start to happen until I had met every single and exceeded every single goal, every single thing that anyone in society said I was supposed to have, do, or be. I had it all. Checked all the boxes. And then I stood there and I was like, really? Really? Like, this is it? This can't be it. I did it wrong. I didn't get it right. I have to fix this. There's something wrong. Because nothing outside of me gives me the meaning, the purpose, and the joy of what I generate myself. And it doesn't make me independent. I think what I've realized, because in my early years, I was the most driven, independent person. That was one part of who I was. I think it makes me realize that I am interdependent. And because of that interdependence, it's those walls breaking down. And recognizing that there's an even better solution than what I think is possible. And I know in my heart that when I am honest and true and authentic, and that's all three things tied together. Everything turns out better when I can put these things into practice and live them.
So when you're paying attention to your belonging now, do you find that there are more places where you belong that you didn't realize before?
I can't say more. I can't say more at all. I'll say that I used to make a judgment that the quality of who I was in relation to how many friends I had, or how many acquaintances I had, or how many of whatever. It had to be more.
Okay.
And now I am absolutely content. And I have less than one handful of close friends.
But when I hear you say that, I assume, so this belonging for you is primarily in relationships, obviously, again. Am I following?
And just knowing, I make conscious decisions to speak up and tell my truth, regardless of the consequences. Because if the consequence is you're not going to like me and you're going to ask me to leave, then that's what needs to happen. And it's better that it happen early than later. There's just a lot of suffering and drama when you don't show up as yourself?
Makes sense to me, but a lot of it makes sense, right? It's just a matter of like actually putting it into action. That's the hard part.
And it's interesting. So there is one word that describes absolutely everything I do in my practice, in my area of service, in what I consider myself a teacher in. And the way that you get there is through awareness. It's by increasing your awareness. And you just tune in. You just listen. You allow. You name. You notice. And it's like a muscle. It's going to naturally grow.
I'm always wanting to ask you the specifics, but I'll refrain.
Ask away, because if you're asking, I feel like there's more people that are asking the same thing, because I know that I speak in very general terms and metaphorically with lots of pictures and...
Well, I think it's more that you've been doing this for so long that to say, like, I just allow makes sense to you now. Like, it automatically has it resonates with you and your experience. But what the hell does just allow mean? Like, what's like the daily practice? How do you allow? You know what I'm saying?
So there's one experience that I remember moving through that was super, super painful. And I'll describe that to you as a practical way to move through the, like, literally pain and suffering of coming closer to what your truth is. David and I have been married a lot of years. Was our 25th anniversary. And a couple of years ago, when you're married that long, you have figured out all the hard stuff, right? You really have. You've figured out the hard stuff, or you've accepted it. You accept it, you make it better, or you leave it. I had accepted whatever, and there was only one thing that I knew that I absolutely could not deal with. And it sounds stupid, but it's true. We had gotten ourselves into a pattern, and it's interesting that I said I couldn't pick something on the menu when we went down the whole food path, but we had gotten ourselves into a pattern of, honestly, even today, the hardest decision we make, our lives are so ridiculously free and fun and easy that I literally feel guilty sometimes about it. But oh well. So the hardest thing that we do every day is decide where we're going to eat. Like, where we're going to eat. But before, the painful part before, and I know it sounds silly, but it was embedded into my being. It was a part of who I felt like I needed to be a good mother and a good wife. I hate to cook, and I wasn't admitting that. And I didn't enjoy being in the kitchen. And I just don't find myself like planning meals and Like, when the boys were young, it was about quantity, not quality. But so a couple of years ago, David would come home from work and he'd say, "So what's for dinner?" And my stomach would turn into knots because I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even think about it." Oh, you can imagine the scene, right? And that's when I knew, like, if my stomach is in knots, something's wrong here. Why is my stomach in knots? I believed that in order for me to be a good wife and a good mother, I had to enjoy cooking. I wasn't allowing myself to be who I was. And so when I finally had the courage, and this was tough, like a sit down, serious conversation, I don't enjoy cooking and I'm not going to do it. Like, I might do it once or twice a week, like when I feel like it. But for the most part, we've got to figure out something else. That was one of the most difficult conversations I have had to have because it was so much a part of who I thought I was supposed to be. And it was so far away from who I really am.
It's interesting you use that example to describe allowing, because my idea of it was that it was more of like a passive thing. Like, you allow is like different, I mean, it's a form of taking action, but it just seems different to me in my brain. But in this example, obviously, you're allowing or kind of like just accepting the fact that that's what it is, but then you still had to take action to make it, I don't know, not positive, but like just kind of like make it healthy, like a healthy experience in your life.
And here's the distinction about the action that you take. And this is one of the foundational principles of what I've experienced and what I believe and what I teach. I will this is a hill that I will stand on and preach about. You want to move towards what brings you joy, what makes you feel alive. Move towards what you love instead of away from what you fear. And in that specific example, I was afraid that David would get mad at me. It was important that he not be mad at me, that he think I was a good wife and a good mother and a good person. But it was so far away from what brought me joy. It literally tied my stomach in knots. And who knows how long I kept even that feeling down, like holding a beach ball under the water. I didn't even recognize that it was something that I needed to address. And so I think slowly my awareness grew, and it got to the point where I literally said, come hell or high water, I give a shiz about the consequences. I have to do something about this. And I wouldn't recommend getting to that point at all. Right?
Yeah.
You don't want to leave a trail of chaos and carnage behind you. But you'll know. Like if you allow yourself to be still. We fidget a lot in this culture. I mean, we fidget. We think that we always have to be in motion. We always have to be moving towards something. We don't allow ourselves to just sit and reflect. You don't have to call it meditation. You don't have to call it prayer. You don't have to call it anything. My dad is a blue collar scholar. That's what I call him. And every day after work, he would water, even though he had a sprinkler, he'd water his lawn. And for me, this is his stillness. This is his practice to come back into his own being, to renew himself. We don't have those kinds of things in our lives as much as we need them, in my opinion.
Well, yeah. Nowadays, you have to make an effort to have that happen.
But you're not making an effort if you know what your yeses and nos are. If you know your yeses and nos, if you know what's okay and not okay, the things that aren't right for you, they're going to drop away, and there'll be more than enough space for the things that are necessary to you, uniquely you. And yours are totally different than mine. Mm-hmm. So we've been chatting a long time. Before we wrap things up, do you have any other curiosities or?
No, I'm just wanting you to summarize again more than anything. So 1, 2, 3.
So in summary, the first thing that I've learned that made me feel like a grown-up is walls aren't going to protect me. They literally just close me off. So, vulnerability, intimacy, whatever it is, it's where the juice is. And it was a lie to think that if I was thick enough and strong enough and not let anyone hurt me, that was living better. And then the second one was boundaries. I knew what a boundary was. I could define a boundary, but I could not experience a boundary. Mm-hmm. And so when I understood, when I experienced, when I knew that the knots in my stomach or the delight in the back of my throat, like these things started to draw me to what's okay and what's not okay. And when I'm suffering, when I'm debating a decision, it's because I have those yeses and nos mixed up. I still want to be liked if I'm confused. And then the third thing is just the distinct difference between fitting in somewhere and belonging. It's like the difference between ice and boiling water. And that's when you get that, you get it. And you get there slowly, just like with everything else. Tiny, tiny little steps every day, all day, every day. They're just normal things that move through your day. It's not like big, huge things. They're drips, slow, slow drips. And I think I added in a thing. It is just as you're choosing what direction to go in or what path, or if you're trying to discern something, if you're avoiding a fear, probably not kosher. It's probably not cool. If you're moving towards love, towards joy, towards what you enjoy, what brings you joy, that's the direction you should be going in. And not in the should with the quotes around the should, but that your heart is literally drawing you to. Is that a good summary, Sarah?
Yep.
See, right there, I just wanted your approval.
Well, you're confirming that you answered my question. But yeah.
Cool. So it's been super, super awesome to have you. And if you want to learn, Sarah is a certified Martha Beck life coach. You can find her at Sarah Dietman, Sarah
It's a tricky one.
I know.
Just remove the E. Dit.
Dietman. Sarah Dietman.com. So go and look for her.
Well, happy belated birthday.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining me here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. If something needs to change and you don't quite know what it is yet, tune in and turn inward. I host an online learning community where we can figure it out together. It feels like a little family, and it's a place where you can be supported and offer support, because togetherness sparks change. Visit my digital home at viviancarrasco.com to learn more.